Calling to order the Safety Committee meeting of the MTA Board. Pat Warren, are there any public speakers that we know?
Yes, there are.
Turn it on.
Yes, there are.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. We have 5 members of the public registered to speak today. As a reminder, we ask all public speakers adhere to the MTA's rules of conduct and decorum. I would also like to remind our public speakers that in the interest of time and fairness to all speakers, we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware that there will be a warning beep to remind you that you have 30 seconds to conclude your remarks. The first speaker will be Jason Anthony, followed by Murray Bolden.
Anthony, we meet again.
Yes, Yano. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Again, Jason Anthony from Amazon Labor Union. Once again, let's talk about safety. Not only the incident that occurred on April 12th on 36th Street on my beloved 4th Avenue line. I was on the subway the other night going home, and I saw a person smoking on the N train. It was 2 in the morning. And we're talking about on a R46 that was built back in 1976 that doesn't have an intercom like in the new tech equipment that we could press the intercom and communicate with the conductor. But it has the emergency brakes. But if we press the emergency brakes, something could happen with the train. But we should have no smoking inside the train. But I was on South Ferry that same night. I saw NYPD, I saw BRC in full display. But why not on Whitehall Street, South Ferry on the R&W side? What's going on? Double standard? Why in one station but not in the other side? Jano, we need more work to do. Let's break the norm. I'll see you guys in the commuter rail.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Murray Bolden, followed by Lisa Daglian.
So what is safety? Safety means creating a condition where somebody doesn't get into an accident. It means telling people the truth consistently. Kathy Sheridan taught me that years and years ago. If you tell people 2 different things, and this is distracted driving month, and you expect them to look up from the traffic, from their texting, when a light turned green, the guy behind honked the horn, and they're supposed to know, where am I supposed to go next? This came up because of the lines on the Henry Hudson Bridge. They're illegal on the left, and they don't care, and they don't want to embarrass anybody. But if you can't get that one line legally correct, you're giving permission to the rest of the traffic engineers in New York City ignore the law. You're giving permission to go down when you go to George Washington Bridge. People go to the left, and then they cut across that gutter area, create road rage. Who's going to take responsibility to make the lines consistently legal? The line under the Henry Hudson Bridge is illegal by the Federal Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. It's been illegal for 20 years. Nobody had the guts to change it. Who's got the guts to tell the truth? When you tell the truth, and you give a driver consistent information, you avoid accidents. When I said $10 million cost at the last meeting, yeah, that's how much wasted because you cause accidents that could have been avoided. Just one will do it. I going.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lisa Daglian, followed by Christopher Greif.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Lisa Dagley, and I'm the Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA PCAC. I want to thank you all for everything that you did during the shooting on the N train last week. We really appreciate all of the help and assistance that the MTA provided, that the police departments provided, and certainly that the riders and transit workers stepped up to provide. You're all heroes and saved many lives that day. Safety is the number one issue on riders' minds, regardless of whether they're on a subway, bus, Staten Island Railway, the Long Island Railroad, Metro North, or any combination thereof. And we know it's your number one priority, too. And each committee meeting devotes time to discussing trends and crime numbers and steps that are being taken to address rider fears and address safety in the system. It's such an important issue that we are once again asking that this safety committee broaden its parameters to include crime and safety across all operating agencies. The safety you cover now is of great importance and should still be discussed and included, but the overarching concerns that riders have and the current situation we're in and experiencing merit a separate committee that encompasses all aspects of safety and steps the MTA and PD and all relevant law enforcement agencies are taking to address. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is Christopher Greif, followed by Charlton DeSalsa.
Good afternoon. I'm Christopher D. Greif, and I do agree with Lisa Daglier that I want to thank that with all that help and working together with the passengers, the MTA workers, the NYPD, all working together to help, try to save all the customers, especially the crew of the R train that moved them up to the next stop, because you never know if that train was going to explode. It was hard to tell, but at least they got them out, some of the customers, the best they can, and they did the job. But we need to remind our safety always. We need to work on increasing more cameras at the station as well. And maybe when we have trains that are coming in with the newer train models, we can have cameras on the trains as well, if it's possible. But one thing I'm going to say, John, we meet again on the screen, face to face. And I do want to thank you because complimenting the MTA staff, it is showing that we are working strongly like we ever do. But we do need to continue working with everyone. If you see something, say something. We need to encourage that more around the whole region. And we need to make sure that our community must work together. That's for disabilities and seniors. We need to work together at this time. If we see something's not right, we need to let the conductor know. Especially with the newer trains, we have the intercoms on those trains. Yes, on the newer trains. But again, we still continue. We must keep advocating to get more cameras and have work together with the NYPD and the MTA police. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Charlton DeSalsa.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charlton D'Souza, president of Passengers United. And we need cameras in all the newer subway cars. I'm going to keep repeating that until it gets done. What I want to know, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Lieber, is this. The minimum wage security guards that you guys have hired from Allied Security, they're doing an excellent job patrolling the stations, but I am getting reports from them that when they call for police assistance, the police are not showing up in many cases. And sometimes it's taking them 30 to 40 minutes or they don't show up at all when there's dangerous individuals in the system. So, I want to also know, because I was told that the security contract with Allied Security is only valid for up to 1 year, or it's valid for a few months. So I want to know, how come you guys have not engaged in a 2-year or 3-year contract with them? And also, why are they not getting paid more? And also with these new metal detectors, they announced today there was going to be a pilot program. What I want to know is, why can these security guards operate those metal detectors and give them permanent jobs? Because a lot of times we see the police. My biggest complaint is, I support the police, but my complaint is they're playing with their phones, hiding in corners. No, we need the police officers to do train order maintenance sweeps, TOMS, where they're going in the trains, looking for people. But there's times like when I saw a 12-9 incident about to occur in the system. We were looking for the police and we couldn't find them, and a guy was trying to commit suicide on the tracks. We called 911, no one showed up. So this is the problem we have. And Mr. Chairman, you need to speak with the NYPD and get these issues resolved now. I mean, it's ridiculous. We're not getting much support from them, and I just want things done better.
Thank you all for your comments. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our public speakers for today.
Thank you to all our public speakers. Pat, Warren, are there changes to the work plan?
Chairman, there is one change to the work plan. The track intrusion mitigation update was supposed to be for this particular meeting, but it was given at during the last month's board cycle, so we don't need to do it this meeting.
And I'll now move to the minutes. May I have any changes to the minutes that were distributed for the January
Nothing?
committee meeting?
Oh, wow. Oh, great.
Nothing, okay. Can I have a motion?
I so move.
Second? Any opposition? Minutes are approved. Pat, will you take us through today's program, please?
All right. Thank you, Chairman. Safety statistics can be viewed in the committee book beginning on page 8 and have been discussed in the agency committee meetings or will be in the following railroad committee. As we continue to work through the disruptions caused by the pandemic, employee injuries remain low and trend down. Customer injuries also remain low, but we've seen slight increases in minor injuries due to slips, trips, and falls, largely associated with our customer recent propensity to not hold handrails and safety bars inside of our stations, trains, and buses. Messaging to remind customers to use this apparatus will continue to reinforce this requirement. We frequently remind the public and our employees that their safety and security are our top priorities. And this has never been more important than at this moment when we continue to fight through COVID, address the national homeless crisis, and the increase in violent crime. Certainly, the horrific shooting of April 12th brings this to a fine point. Under our chairman's leadership, we have focused on safety and security in a larger way than has been seen in recent memory. Coordination for more police in train cars and on platforms to improve security presence, focus on trespass and track intrusion prevention innovations to protect the public and decrease delays, and partnership with the city and state to get support to the most vulnerable population, those experiencing homelessness, to name a few of the areas of recent focus. Most recently, and there's been a lot of attention drawn to the closed-circuit camera system stemming from the April 12th shooting at the 36th Street station on the N line. And some have heard this in a little bit of this in other meetings already, but I think it's important enough to bring forward again. As this committee is aware, emphasis on the CCTV camera system as part of our security apparatus did not start on April 12th, but rather years earlier. Just in the subway system, there are over 10,000 cameras, of which 4,000 were installed in the last 4 years. Further, there's over 370 million, thank you, dedicated to CCTV camera systems in the 20 to 24 capital program, and that's just in the subway system. I cannot exaggerate as to how useful these images are from these cameras that have been used by the NYPD for identification of alleged criminals. This included providing 36 different video images from the April 12th shooting incident, which proved invaluable in their identification and tracking of the shooter. This is just really a great tribute to how much emphasis the board, this committee, and others have put on cameras out there, and how valuable it's been to stemming crime. So I think it's well worth taking a moment to think about that. I will also take a moment to highlight that we have thousands more cameras in the use across the commuter railroads, the bridges and tunnels, as well as in our bus system. Improving CCTV systems across all other agencies is also prioritized over the next few years. Let me also add that the training of our employees is an additional component for our safety and security programs. Of note, active shooter training is part of every agency's training regime, and certainly was important on April 12th. Now about COVID. The pandemic continues to play a major role in our lives. In recent weeks, the federal and state governments have reduced face covering standards in various venues. One area where New York State continues to require the use of masks is within public transportation, to include the MTA, and we continue our established programs to promote this use. Since the height of the effects of Omicron variant on the MTA, like the rest of the region, we have experienced huge decreases in the number of COVID cases, with the vast majority of cases having been mild or with no symptoms. Our positivity rate is low, just over 1%, which in part can be attributed to the compliance of our strong vaccination or test program, which sees 95 to 90% compliance weekly. We were also gratified to see reports of workplace violence trending down, which we attribute to efforts over the last several months of having more MTA police on railroad train patrol, adding MTA PD to bus routes where we have the highest reported incidence of assaults, and the increased presence of NYPD on subway station platforms and trains. The board received a report on track intrusions and trespassing during the last board cycle. As follow-up, we are witnessing a decreasing trend in the number of intrusions, but the amount of the increasing trend is still well above the intrusions that we saw in 2021. So there's more work to do there. The majority of cases are due to voluntary trespass on the tracks. Stations with high incidence of trespass are provided to the NYPD for focused monitoring. With that introduction, I'll now turn to the two topics that are in the work plan: legitimization of marijuana in New York State and police reform. Okay. Regarding how New York State's legislation of the use of marijuana currently impacts MTA. In short, the new law does not change MTA's drug program, and more specifically, the prohibition of the use of specified drugs to include cannabis. The major controlling factor is that the federal government has not legitimized the use of marijuana. As such, the drug and alcohol regulations of the federal agencies that regulate the MTA, such as the Federal Railroad Administration, the Federal Transit Administration, the Federal Motor Carrier Administration, have not changed. Regulations from these administrations prohibit employees in key safety-sensitive positions, such as train and bus crews, from the use of marijuana and a host of other illegal performance-impairing drugs on or off duty. The pace of change regarding marijuana is high, and we continue to closely monitor these changes. Anybody have any questions about that?
I guess one triggered. You're talking about You're talking about employees.
Correct.
What about folks that are above outdoor platforms and such? I mean, in New York City now, you can smoke marijuana walking in the street, but you can't drink a beer outside, which is an odd inversion. But what about someone who's walking on an outdoor platform smoking a marijuana joint?
So smoking is prohibited throughout our system, right? So that's the sort of bylaw. Yeah, even outdoors. Yeah, anywhere in our system, it's. Vape. You're not supposed to vape either, right? Any of that you're not supposed to do. It's all prohibited. Except for on the outdoor platforms, but correct. Yes, right. Yeah. He brings up a good point. Currently, you're supposed to be wearing a mask anyway, so it's pretty hard to smoke or vape in the system, right?
You know, I'm sure you've seen the people that stick it in. Yeah. Yeah.
Pat, what does the MTA do about drug testing the employees?
So there is a significant regime and program for that, highly regulated by those federal agencies that I named a moment ago. They We have a requirement depending on which agency, whether it's a railroad or whether it's transit, in the frequency of certain people in safety-sensitive positions. So this includes folks that like the train controllers that are, the control dispatch, some of our signal maintainers, and certainly the crews on the different trains and buses out there. There's a random program that they have to go through annually. We, as an organization, have to test a certain percentage of that group randomly, and if they come up positive, then they have to go on a program, and then if they fail that, then they're eliminated from the organization. Okay.
All right, onward from marijuana.
Okay. Following the George Floyd murder, New York State issued reform directives to community-based police departments. The MTA, like the New York State Police, is not considered a community-based department and was not required to follow these directives. That said, we did see the importance and benefits of these reform requirements and did comply. Specifically, there are 4 overarching requirements in the state directive, which include improved internal affairs processes, training, transparency, and public outreach. Of note, the Office of the Inspector General supported our efforts in the development of our police reform program with a series of recommendations. I'll go into a bit of detail as to what the MTA implemented. Regarding the internal affairs process improvement processes, one of the focus of the New York State reform requirements was to establish processes that would provide a more standardized police complaint investigation process that would lead to consistently applied outcomes and greater transparency. In support of these requirements, the MTA PD reached out to sister organizations and national associations to acquire and incorporate best practices. This included the creation of a matrix where acts of indiscipline were tied to a range of standard discipline measures. This tool helps ensure that all officers understand the consequences of actions and expect fair treatment. Further, the process for filling a complaint out and the processes of complaint were revamped to include more standardized documentation. A second significant measure taken by the MTA PD to improve their internal affairs processes was to professionalize the process of selecting, training, and certifying their Internal Affairs Bureau officers. Importantly, they now utilize the FBI's Law Enforcement Executive Development Program in this training process. The MTA currently has an outdated records management system, which makes it more cumbersome to securely manage officer investigation records, as well as is not compatible with integrating new technologies such as body cameras into the records management process. A new system will improve our ability to identify emerging issues with officers and take corrective action. That's an important key piece of this program. Last month, the board approved the funding for our new records management system, which is going out for competitive bid now. This new system will lead to a significant improvement in quality, processing time, analysis, and storage of a myriad of police records. Of further significance is that the reform actions instituted by the PT contributed to the PD's receiving the New York State's highest accreditation this last year. Improved transparency and interaction with the public are 2 of the police reform goals. Today, interaction with our police often begins by accessing an online web page. To make this experience better, our police examined best practices and incorporated many improvements into their web page with the goal of making it easier to find information about the police, to include their activities, alerts, and complaints. Improved access to information was further enhanced by increased routine outreach to communities and partners. Some are listed on the slide. There's a robust program out there which includes both leadership and the patrol officers themselves. Training may be the most important aspect of reform. The MTA PD adopted the best practice from the Municipal Police Training Council, which includes advanced techniques in detaining a subject, de-escalation training, and crisis intervention. The PD ensured that all its officers were trained immediately within months following the reform directives. Further, the PD incorporated a substantial simulator training program into its annual officer training requirements. Here, officers are run through multiple scenarios where situation assessment, de-escalation, crowd control, and a multitude of other crises are experienced. So I'll end by saying that the MTA PD is an important part of the fabric of communities from New Haven to Poughkeepsie to New York City and to the northern tip of Long Island. Its partnership with and the confidence that comes from working within these communities is what allows the transit riders to feel protected, safe, and comfortable as they go about their commute. The MTA PD, as well as the leadership and workforce across the MTA, are committed to doing all in their power to deliver a quality experience. Chairman, that concludes our remarks.
Can I just add a note? Since I joined on the 20th floor, we've definitely asked the MTA PD to take on some additional missions. One is to participate as a partner with the NYPD in running these end-of-line station operations, which are purposed at getting the homeless who are sheltering in the system an opportunity to get services or to get into a better housing situation, God willing. So that's a really challenging operation, and the MTA PD, under Pat's leadership and under the leadership of the chiefs at MTA PD, thank you for that. This is very much a work in progress. This is a challenging mission because it's a lot of people and a lot of complex choreography when you're in a station and trying to interact with people at the end of the line. But that's something that they've taken on in a couple of these very important stations. The other is that we have done a significant increase in the amount of train patrol on commuter railroads, and that was in response to lots of things, our riders wanting to, expressly letting us know that they wanted to see more officers as part of being able to feel safe as they were coming back. Not principally because there was a fair amount of, as we're all aware, there was, over mask usage, which is, not, we're not at the end of that cycle. But there was a fair amount of conflict, and the riders were wanting to see more presence of uniformed officers. So the MTA PD has stepped up on that, but that continues to be a priority, to be very visible on the trains especially, and also on the platforms, as well as their other more routine patrols. So I just want to acknowledge that they have responded to those requests from leadership, and we're going to continue to ask them to up the game for all of us, because they're such an important part of the security equation in the region. Any further comments on Pat's presentation or other issues, Mr. Brinkman?
Yeah, Pat, as you know, the PCAC, which I chair, has some serious concerns about safety in Penn Station, the homeless situation, panhandlers, and your office had recently given us an update on that. And I just think it would be nice, just if you give us like the Reader's Digest version to the other board members of the challenges that your people are facing in Penn Station, trying to deal with everything and the multitude of different agencies that are there. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure. Penn Station is, of course, it's the one spot where largest transportation hub in the city, welcomes more people into New York City than any other hub out there, right? And it has a confluence of a bunch of different departments and agencies and organizations that come into it. So I'm sure I'll miss some of them, but certainly Amtrak Police, NYPD, both above ground and below, and Transit Bureau Police, Postal Police, MTA Police, as well as the security organizations that work the Madison Square Garden and the rest of those facilities in there.
The National Guard is present.
Yeah, National Guard, yeah. There's also the business community that are part of our that we work with there to try to understand what their issues are and challenges, and garner their support in some of the activities or that they do or ask them not to do in order to try to stem the challenge of that is large there. And this challenge that is there is multi levels to it. One is certainly there's the homeless challenge. The second challenge is there's a lot of emotionally disturbed people that come in there for different reasons. There's a huge substance abuse challenge and other crime that goes into Penn Station right now. Sometimes they're all manifested in the same person. Sometimes all those conditions are in different people that are out there, and they require different, often different agencies within the city to deal with them. So you have the police looking at the actual crime issues. You have the outreach workers from either DHS, Department of Homeless Services, or BRC. And then there's OASIS and other substance abuse kinds of organizations, health organizations that are part of that community there. Not to mention the plethora of community-based kinds of outreach that are in the local area that do, sort of soup kitchen kind of stuff and other outreach that are around the city, which makes it active interest point for those that are in need. So with that many people out there, and none of them were necessarily the many organizations, and none of them necessarily controlling the whole thing. We have a significant effort in Penn Station, and weekly effort, and we're now doing it at Grand Central Terminal also, to try to bring that group that I just described together weekly and talk through what we're seeing, where the problems are, and how we might get after the issues. Some kinds of things we do is that has been discussed is making sure lighting is the best it can be in different locations out there, trying to get cameras in the right place to observe, best observe those nooks and crannies out there that cause problems. Trying to make sure that we have counters that go into the station every week, and we try to get fairly accurate numbers of individuals, not just that are in the station at all, but where in the station they are, so that we know where to focus police and other outreach resources to go after the challenge that's there. So a lot of coordination trying to go on to try to make that a better place. As you go through it, and as the board member Brigham points out, it's a lot has been done. It looks better in general when you go in there, but it is not a problem that is solved, and is not a problem that you can take your eye off the ball on because of just the nature of those issues that we described there. So there's quite a bit going on there.
So I just want to say two things. One is, I consider this, we are the lead organization, at least in the Long Island Railroad level. It's very difficult because Amtrak has a very different standard for how they police the NJT level, and the upper level, which they've now largely abandoned, having moved across to Moynihan. So, I've been a couple times to roll call. I think once we went on Saturday morning, and what we impress upon folks is this is, from an MTA standpoint, this is our house, and it has to be a quality environment for our passengers. It's highly visible. It's the one area that we control that Long Island Railroad level. Two, the challenge that we face is it's not disconnected from the effort to create a new pen. Because part of the challenge is that there are, as Pat uses the phrase, nooks and crannies. There are a lot of narrow, poorly lit, low ceiling, cramped corridors, and there are other areas where all kinds of stuff goes on. And part of what the governor has talked about for changing existing Penn, not Moynihan, which is already a place you can stand in the middle of and see what's going on in all directions, but existing Penn is part of the reason for wanting to open it up, is to have a much more manageable security environment and a much better passenger environment. So, lots of complex issues associated with that idea of turning existing Penn into something more like Moynihan, or, even in our dreams, something like Grand Central. But that is part of the benefit of that project and why we ought to keep working. In the meantime, when we double the width, when we finish that project, which is going to be done in roughly the end of this year, to double the width of the main east-west corridor of the Long Island Railroad level, raise the ceiling, I think a lot of the challenges of a public environment where you don't have a ton of visibility are going to be mitigated, although it's not by no means the end of that process. Okay? Thank you for the question. Huge issue. Somebody else raising a question?
Yeah, I believe.
Mr. Tessitore, thank you.
Thank you. I apologize for not being able to be there. For Pat Warren, I guess, can we maybe look into reinforcing the issue on the marijuana use, especially for the FRA, the people that are affected by the drug and alcohol policies through the FRA? Maybe some information to reinforce that they're unable to use it at any given time, maybe some information about CBT therapy and the use of edibles. We get lots of questions about secondhand smoke now that it's so prevalent, not only in the streets, but in people's homes. Maybe just an information piece to answer a lot of questions that our employees have.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get right on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that is, okay. Yeah, I think that concludes our agenda for this meeting. Are there any other comments or questions that board members wish to raise? Okay, with that, I'll just note the next safety committee is July 2022. I will ask for a motion to adjourn, but first, let me just remind folks that we've adjusted the schedule. In this case, it was principally because of quorum issues that we jiggered the schedule at the last minute. But we are trying to put this safety committee more in the center of the day so that we maybe maximize attendance and also get a chance to maybe talk a little bit about some of the bigger topics. So we're going to give it a little more time, and we are going to juggle the schedule, hopefully a little more in advance than we did just last week. Unless there's anything else, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Second, we're adjourned. Thank you.